Okay, so that concludes our first day of Racquetball camp. Make sure to check in the bulletin board to see which server you'll be staying in tonight. And let's just try to have as much fun as possible this week. And I don't want to hear about any demos from the nurse, okay? Now, do we have any questions?
Coach, I have one.
Yeah, the neckbeard in the back.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, why do I suck at Rocket League? Right, guys?
All right, that's very funny. Now, any serious questions? Anybody? No Seth Rogen or Tina from Bob's Burgers jokes, okay?
Oh my God, he does look like Seth Rogen.
When are you going to teach us something useful for once?
Excuse me?
You heard me. Teach us something useful.
Yeah, rotation and tips and detailed training guides just aren't enough for you guys, are they? You always need more. I'll give you more. Legend speaks of a skill that may be what you're looking for. It's called turning away when you defend, so it's easier to guide the ball into the corner rather than seeking a 50-50, which will most likely backfire. I mean, shadow defense.
Ooh, I do like that.
Shadow defense is essentially mimicking what your opponent does as you drive towards your own goal, waiting for the best time to challenge. In this episode, we'll see how shadowing is the safest way to defend, its uses in 1s, 2s, and 3s, as well as the mechanics you need to make it effective. Plus, some custom training to work on those mechanics. The basic idea is that moving with the ball to hit it safely into your corner is a lot more reliable than putting all your eggs in one basket for one 50-50 at best. A lot of goals are scored when the last defender charges in, when they could have safely guided the ball into the corner and bought time for their team to get back. In order to understand shadow defense, we first have to understand positioning. First, imagine the field is divided lengthwise into two halves. Whichever side your opponent is dribbling or shooting from is the side you need to position your car and drive towards your near post. When to challenge is up to you, but it's usually best to wait for them to make a mistake. It's important to challenge when you're facing your goal, pushing the ball into your own corner. Not positioning yourself in the correct half of the field leaves your opponent with a number of ways to beat you, including mind games. In fact, you have very few options when you're on the wrong side of the field. Another advantage of shadow defense is that you get to dictate when the challenge occurs, instead of diving in with a low probability of winning a 50-50. Another important part of the positioning is spacing. Let's look at some pros playing shadow defense. Here's Squishy Muffins in a 1v1. Notice how he drives towards his opponent, not as a fake challenge, but to get into that sweet spot. The sweet spot for shadow defense is far enough away that any flick won't go over your head, but close enough to stop them from cutting the ball. Here, Squishy easily defends the flick and starts the counterattack. Like I said, you have to be close enough so they don't cut you. If you're positioned correctly, when they drive infield like they're going for a cut, you can immediately challenge before the cut gets started, as seen here. So here, see how Squishy first drives to the same half of the field as his opponent before starting the shadow defense. He then waits for the right moment, challenges, and again starts the counterattack. And that brings us to the most important point, which is when do you use shadow defense? The general rule is to use it when you're the last defender. In 1s, you're always the last defender, so there really is never a bad time to use it. And most of the clips we've seen so far have been 1v1s. In 2s and 3s, however, you need to decide when and where to use it. Let's look at some pros playing 2v2. Here we see Squishy playing with J-Naps. Right here, Squishy sees J-Naps retreating and decides to challenge immediately. Even if he loses the challenge, J-Naps will regain possession. So if you're not the last man, don't shadow, just challenge. But in this clip, we see the teammate commit, and because now he's the last defender, he uses shadow defense. He circles around to the same side of the field the ball is on, faces his own goal, and then makes the play, resulting in a counterattack. Why is it important to be the last defender in shadow defense? If you're not, you might block the ball away from your teammate. And sure enough, Sizz admits that he's ball chasing to the max right now.
Holy shit, I'm ball chasing the max right now.
So instead of committing, oftentimes it's better to play it safe and shadow. Another benefit of shadowing as the last man is it gives your teammate time to get back.
Maybe you can shoot that?
Watch how Sizz shadows while Garrett G interrupts the dribble. So in 2s, you use shadow defense pretty often as well. But what about 3v3s when you're the last defender even less? With perfect rotation, you can continuously challenge the ball without ever having to delay with shadow defense. Watch this sequence from the world champions Gale Force, and notice how their rotations are so smooth, they can keep challenging without ever needing to use shadow defense.
Gates looming, lines zooming, moving while that bass booming. Fear be the nuisance that's choking me more than nooses. Losing sense of direction, the way of losing depression. Drank a little more and maybe even gave me some blessings.
But, as you guys know, perfection is far from possible, especially for me and you guys, of course. Here we see Cloud9 and RLCS, and Squishy sees both teammates upfield, and decides to shadow. He takes time to position himself on the half the shot is coming from, before easily making the clear. And here we see Chaussette from PSG shadow to block a midfield pass, once again leading to an easy clear. And finally, here's Squishy seeing both teammates commit, and he decides whether to stay back and shadow or commit. Right here, he sees JNaps flip back to defense, prompting him to attack. So what kind of mechanics are needed to pull off shadow defense? The basic move is to have ball cam on, retreat towards your near post, then jump, turn your car, and flip. Use air roll very briefly as well to help you turn your car towards the ball. However, to get high shots as well as defend your backboard, you want a double jump, which is going to require you to do a fast aerial takeoff, which I think most of you know how to do, but if you don't, I'll put Kev Pert's tutorial on that in the description. To help you practice these mechanics, my new channel collaborator Orange has made a custom training pack just for you guys. Here's the code, and it'll also be in the description if you want to try it out. The first shots are pretty simple, but the later ones will require double jump mechanics. One last thing you need to know about shadow defense. If your opponent dribbles really close to your goal, sometimes you don't have time to air roll and have to double jump as seen here. Shadow defense is a tool everyone should have, and the mechanics involved help with so many aspects of Rocket League. In fact, a lot of redirects and clears use the exact same mechanics. So instead of listening to your primitive instinct and crashing all in at every ball anywhere within your vicinity, consider working on shadow defense.
Can I leave now?
Yeah, no one's forcing you to stay.
It says I am unable to leave the lobby unless I subscribe.
Oh, that's weird.
Gates looming, lines zooming, moving while that bass booming. Fear be the nuisance that's choking me more than nooses. Losing sense of direction, the way of losing depression. Drank a little more and maybe even gave me some blessings.